We acknowledge the lives lost to suicide and recognise those who have survived suicide attempts and those who struggle today or in the past with thoughts of suicide, mental health issues, and crisis situations. We acknowledge all those who have felt the deep impact of suicide, including those who love, care, and support people experiencing suicidality and those experiencing the pain and bereavement through suicide. We respect collaboration with people who have a lived or living experience of suicide and mental health issues and value their contribution to the work we do.
I was talking to my dad and he said, you can't look after other people if you're not looking after yourself. I feel selfish when I look after myself. But I went, no, I'm not just looking after myself. I'm looking after other people by looking after myself.
Welcome to Holding On to Hope, a series that shares the stories of everyday Australians that have experienced moments in crisis and found a path to support. Whilst all of the stories shared offer hope and inspiration, at times you may hear something you find triggering. If you or someone you know needs crisis support, please phone Lifeline on 13 11 14, text 0477 13 11 14, or visit lifeline.org.au for Lifeline chat service, which is 24/7.
Welcome to Holding On to Hope. On today's episode, we are joined by Grace. Grace's journey, marked by the challenges of mental health, began with suicidal thoughts that emerged in childhood. Diagnosed with depression and anxiety during her teenage years, Grace's journey has been a testament to perseverance in the face of adversity. Beyond her own struggles, Grace navigates life as a queer woman living with Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome, emphasising the importance of mental health intersectionality. Her advocacy extends to the critical understanding that mental health is multifaceted and interconnected with various aspects of one's life. Currently pursuing a Master of Suicidology, her aim is clear: to pioneer lived experience-led research that revolutionises the quality of care individuals receive in the midst of a suicide crisis. Join us as we delve into Grace's remarkable journey, her advocacy, and her unwavering commitment to creating a world where hope triumphs over despair. Her story is not just one of survival, but of resilience, empowerment, and the unwavering belief in a brighter tomorrow. Hi, Grace. Thanks so much for joining me today. And I'd like to invite you to share whatever you're comfortable in doing so about your childhood.
Yeah, I had a pretty happy childhood in most respects. It was tough at times. Both my parents are in the army, which was a really interesting upbringing. My dad was posted overseas for most of my early childhood, so it was just me, mum, and my grandma. But it was a rough experience at times. You know, having parents in the army, it's a very hard lifestyle. One of the reasons I became interested in mental health was because I saw how much my parents went through, how stressful and difficult the lifestyle was, how hard it was having, a partner overseas all the time. And I remember thinking to myself, I wish I could make mum and dad happy. I wish I could do something to, look after them. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to work in mental health. I wanted to be some sort of doctor, but I hated, anything to do with blood. But I was a good listener. It's one of those really formative childhood memories for me. My parents split up when I was 6, which despite, what most people say, I actually was quite happy they split up. Didn't bother me at all. A lot of people go, oh, it must be really hard. I went, no, it was fine. I had 2 Christmases. It was great. Yeah, I have a really wonderful family, really wonderful stepfather, dad, mum. So I was really quite privileged in a lot of ways. Went to a great school. I had, trouble at school. I was developmentally delayed. So I had trouble with reading, writing, speaking. I had speech therapy for a number of years. I had, tutoring a number of years to catch up, but my brain just could not click. Numeracy, literacy, whenever I did NAPLAN, I was always in those lowest bands, just could not latch on to anything, which really hit my self-esteem. And because of those things, I got bullied quite badly in primary school, just didn't seem to be able to fit in. And I think those are some of the things that, later in life fed into my mental ill health.
Before you reached out for help and support, what was life like for you?
I'd lived with, suicidal thoughts for a number of years since I was 8 years old. It's a very pivotal moment for me. I very vividly remember that first time having that conscious thought. And for a long time, I didn't know I was allowed to reach out for help. It was coming from a rural military background. I felt that, there must be something inherently wrong with me and therefore I should just power through it. And the years went on, and as my physical health declined, my mental health did. And I realized I can't keep going on this way. I went, I'm only 14. I'm a baby. I'm only 14, and I already don't feel like I can get through the next year. And my parents keep telling me that the real world is even harder. So if that's the case, I've got to do something now. I've got to change something. I think a really big factor for me was that my dad reached out for mental health support. He'd struggled silently for a number of years, and seeing him be open about being hospitalized, about starting to, get the support he deserved, having some really open conversations with him about mental health, because we experienced depression and anxiety very similarly. That was a big influencing factor for me. My mum being open about some of her dark times during her life, about times when she'd reached out for help. Hearing the two strongest people I know, I admire my parents greatly. They've always been my heroes, as cheesy as that is. Hearing them say, we've reached out for help, we've reached out for support, I went, well, maybe that's what I should do as well. I remember, I went to the doctor under the guise of my chronic pain. And as we were talking about it, my pain, I said to my doctor, I really don't want to be here. I'm thinking about death. And that was really hard. It was actually not my regular GP. It was someone I'd never seen before, but I thought, what the hell? Why not give it a go? I might never see this doctor again anyway. So if they don't respond in a great way, whatever. And that was the start of my journey. She listened to me. She took me seriously. She referred me to a psychologist. I've had times where, I've had doctors infantilize me and, say, well, should we hospitalize you and stuff like that? But the best experience was just them saying, well, what do you need? What do you want? That was the start of my journey.
What was the pivotal moment that motivated you to take that critical first step in advocating for mental health despite facing adversity?
It wasn't a conscious first step. It just kind of happened. My parents, who I admire greatly, really instilled in me the importance of having integrity, the importance of doing the right thing even when it's hard. And I faced some real difficult times in high school. I experienced a lot of homophobia and ableism. I was told that because I lived with anxiety and depression, I wasn't allowed to be a school captain. I wasn't allowed to hold leadership positions because the school believed I couldn't handle those sorts of things. And growing up with a father who lives with anxiety, depression, and PTSD, he was quite high up in the army, and I knew that leadership, anyone could be a leader regardless of their mental health. And so that was sort of my first step in advocacy. I very publicly advocated against those decisions and said, this is wrong. There were other students who were also told that they were not allowed to have leadership positions because the school knew of their mental health difficulties. And I went, well, that's simply not correct. It's not correct that we prevented people from achieving their goals, from pushing themselves outside of their comfort zone to become who they want to be. It's not right that we are not supporting students who experience homophobia and ableism in this environment. And I got in quite a bit of trouble for that. I got suspended. My first step into advocacy, quite an unusual step, but I remember thinking, oh, my parents are going to kill me. I never even had a detention at school. I had quite severe anxiety, so I was very much seen and not heard. I didn't want to get in trouble. But my parents came and they both told me how proud of me they were. And I went, oh, I've done the right thing. I've acted with integrity. When I went to uni, I was talking to my psych. It was my first year of university, and he said, Grace, you're doing really well. Would you like to join our reference group for the clinic to give us advice on what's happening, on what we can do better to help organise community events? And that was my first step into formal organised advocacy, which was just really special for me that I'd been at this psychological clinic since I was 14. I was 17 in my first year of my psychology degree, and being given the opportunity to actually have a say in how young people get support was really special. So those are the first formal and informal steps into advocacy.
When you were dealing with, being faced and being put into a leadership position, and you were finding that there was the pushback from the school and off the basis of mental health, was that happening at a primary school level, like up until the ages of 12 or 13, or was that a high school?
So this was in high school. I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression when I was 14. I'd experienced the symptoms from about the time I was probably 7 or 8 that I can remember. when I was 14, I was really struggling. I'd been diagnosed with Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome the same year. And it was a lot for a 14-year-old to be told you're going to live with chronic pain for the rest of your life. You might not be able to have children. It was quite confronting for me at that age to be told you might not get to achieve the things you want to achieve because you will always live in pain. Really sucked, to be quite honest. It was really a lot to deal with. And as I struggled to manage my physical health, my mental health became more difficult to manage as well. And I just reached a breaking point, reached out to get support. I got diagnosed and I thought, well, I will tell my school so I can get the academic support I need. I did quite well in high school. I, got the academic support I needed to start achieving at the same level as my peers finally. But with my mental health declining, my, academic performance declined. I went, I know I can do well, but I just need a bit of extra support. I need flexible, assessment dates for when, I'm really struggling. I need to do my exams privately to help with my anxiety. So I told my high school in confidence, because I believed I would get the support I needed because I knew I could achieve equally to my peers if I had that support. And so it really hurt when that was then used against me. It was used in a very paternalistic, infantizing way of, we're trying to take care of you. We don't believe you can do this. And I went, well, why? You have no evidence to say I can't, because up until that point, I'd done all these other leadership positions in primary school and high school, and I'd done volunteering. There was no evidence to say that I couldn't manage it. And I knew from looking at my parents and the other adults in my life who lived with mental health difficulties, they had managed those things while in these, very important leadership positions in the army and in the business world and everything. So I went, well, I don't believe that's true. It was really quite disheartening at the time. But it led me to what I do now. So I'm grateful for it in a weird way.
How do you sustain your commitment to mental health advocacy and suicide prevention amidst the challenges and complexities you face personally and academically?
It's hard. It's not easy, but nothing worth doing is easy, I think. Looking after yourself isn't easy. It is a constant challenge and a struggle. It's doing the hard things when I really don't want to do them. Living with anxiety and depression, I know things are getting bad when I start to withdraw. I'm a very social person, which people are quite surprised by, despite the anxiety. I really love being around people. I love meeting people. But when I start to struggle with things, when I start to feel overwhelmed, I draw in on myself. And so I have to put my foot down and force myself to get out there and put myself out of my comfort zone, because I know it's good for me. Because I know, although I might feel uncomfortable when I first get to an event, when I first start hanging out with people, it will fill my cup. It will remind me of why I do what I do. I've got really amazing friends who have supported me through thick and thin. They've seen me at my best and my worst, and I love catching up with them as regularly as I can, just to have events, to have a chat about things, to get an outside perspective. I'm really lucky in that respect. I hate going to the gym. I hate it. I'm not a sports person. I wish I was built that way. My mother is so athletic and I wish I was built like that. Do not enjoy sport, but I know it's good for me. I know that when I'm feeling stressed, when I'm feeling angry, when I'm feeling anxious, going for a run does help, as much as I hate to admit it. I hate to tell my psychologist he's correct, but he is. It's doing those hard things that I know are good for me. It's having consistency. It's having a schedule. If I don't have a schedule, I will sleep in bed all day. I won't get up. It's terrible. So I try to have not a strict schedule, but I try to book at least one thing in every day, one reason to get out of bed, even if it's just, well, I'm having lunch today and I know it's going to take an hour to get to the city, so I've got to get up early in the morning. I'm going to go to the gym, and then because I'm, hyped up on adrenaline from the gym, I can actually go out and get my groceries and I'm feeling good. It's just having a schedule. It's having something booked in and a reason to get out of bed. Routine's so important. It's the unsexy side of depression and anxiety that we don't talk about a lot, that when you're in that really low space, you forget to shower, you forget to brush your teeth. Days sometimes blur together and you go, oh crap, it's Monday? Wasn't it just Tuesday last week? It's the uncomfortable part of depression that a lot of people don't realize. And so that's why for me, having something booked in where I need to go out is a motivator, because no matter, if I'm at home, I have no reason to do those things. But I had strict military parents who raised me on the importance of you need to look nice and presentable when you go out. So even if I'm just going to the shops, I put on a little bit of makeup and it makes me feel good, and I have a shower and I brush my teeth and I put on something nice, and then I go, I'm actually feeling, I'm not feeling 100%, but I'm feeling better than I was. And I feel like I can actually start tackling some of those bigger goals now.
Gosh, we could talk about good routines for days, couldn't we, Grace? Grace, pursuing a Master of Suicidology to revolutionise the quality of care for individuals facing suicide crises is commendable. How do you envision your lived experience-led research in making a tangible difference in improving mental health care?
I have a lot of dreams, and I'm hoping they'll become reality. For me, as a student, it's really interesting reading research where there has been no lived experience representation in it. It's just purely academic, with no consideration for how things play out practically. There's been a lot of research where I've gone, this would be really great, but there's a lot you're missing. And if you talk to one person with lived experience, just one, you would unlock so many other things to explore. I'm preparing to do my thesis this year, and I picked my topic looking at consent when we're hospitalized, and I realized there's no research on it. And that was really shocking for me as someone of lived experience, as someone who has, been really lucky to be part of the lived experience community and meet lots of different people and hear their stories. It is a really consistent story of, consent when it comes to asking people, can we contact your family and let them know? Whose care do you want to be released into after you're released from hospital? What next steps do we take? Do you want us to contact a community facility, etc.? Consent often isn't asked for. And it's also, can we give consent in those situations? Can you give consent when you're experiencing that trauma? I was, really quite shocked that not only when it comes to suicide, but also other traumatic injuries, that there's a real lack of research on that. And for me as a person of lived experience, that's really important, that when I've had, a traumatic event happen, that a doctor understands there are certain things we have to do right now for your well-being, but there are certain things that aren't immediately necessary. And so let's put off on asking you about them until you're of the right mind to actually have a conversation about these things. I want people of lived experience to have a say in every part of their care as much as possible. And that's not going to happen until we have people of lived experience not only advising on research, as I've had the privilege to do, but also actually conducting that research themselves, because it's a completely different perspective. And also, we say, the lived experience community, but that's so broad. It's one of the things I love about being part of the suicide lived experience community is that everyone's experience is completely unique. I was quite young when I started. I think I was 19 or 20 when I started my degree, and I had a very closed mind of, well, my experience is the only experience. It has to look like this. And obviously that was wrong, because I got to meet people and went, oh, I had a really great experience with using a particular service and another person didn't. And that's okay, because we're individuals with different life experiences and different backgrounds and different triggers. And so it's natural that certain things are going to help me, but not help someone else. I want everything to be guided by lived experience, because that's the only way we're truly going to help people.
We hope you're enjoying this episode. Lifeline's new support toolkit makes it easier to care for family, friends, and loved ones, and look after yourself along the way. Visit us at toolkit.lifeline.org.au. Now, back to the episode.
Grace, throughout your advocacy journey, what have been some of the most significant obstacles you've encountered, and how have you managed to navigate through them?
Sometimes I'm my own obstacle. I can be quite hard on myself, and there's been times where I've thought, God, do I deserve to be here? Do I deserve to be doing what I'm doing? There are other people who are far more articulate than me, who are far smarter than me, who have, different lived experiences to me, who probably deserve to be here more than I do. And there's been times where, I've pulled back from things because I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. Am I, having the right impact that I want to have? And I've had to, sit down, and this is really cheesy, but think about my goals, think about what I want to do. Other obstacles have been, different, projects I've done where I've gone, I don't feel quite supported in what I'm doing. I don't feel like my lived experience is really valued. And even on those projects, I try to stay and, hammer in the importance of lived experience as best I can. But there are times when I've had to step back and go, this isn't going anywhere. This isn't having a healthy, impact. This isn't good for me either. It's probably best if I step back from this project. It can be really hard. I try to stay true to my values and my goals. As cheesy as that probably sounds, I try to stay true to the importance of integrity, of doing what I believe is the right thing. It's important for me I've got some really awesome friends in the lived experience community who have, different lived experience to me. So it's important to me to keep in contact with them and ask them for their opinion. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? Do you think I'm making an impact? Do you think I should be in this position, or should I step aside and let someone else with a lived experience step into it? Because for me, I want as many diverse voices in the room as possible. And to do that, you have to sometimes acknowledge I'm not the right voice for this. I should step aside and let someone else who's got a different voice to me say something, because I don't want to be on every single lived experience project. I want someone else to step in and share an experience that's different from my own. I think those are, the obstacles. Just having the experience of doing different projects has taught me how to navigate them, taught me how to monitor, what an organization's doing and how much they are truly listening to lived experience. Am I the right person for a project? Is this project right for me? Or would it be better if I stepped aside for my own well-being and for the well-being of the project?
Could you share a moment where your advocacy efforts resulted in a tangible change or empowerment for individuals struggling with mental health issues?
It can be really hard working in this sector sometimes, because you don't always get to see tangible change in the moment. It can sometimes be years down the track and it's not always super obvious. The most tangible things for me have been when I have, done a public talk, or I've done, some sort of educational thing. I've worked with psychologists and teaching them how to work with young people, etc. And to see, psychologists say, you've changed how I think about working with young people, or you've given me ideas on how I can better connect with young people. That's really special for me. Having been, a young person in the mental health system and having not always received the support I needed. And, there's a lot of, people who meant well and were trying to do the right thing, but didn't quite know how to do it at times. It's really special when, a young person comes and says to me, this is the first time I felt seen. Your story really resonated with me. I felt like you were talking about my own life. I think I might go reach out for help. It's special when I've sometimes get a message in my Instagram DM saying, hey, I know you do this work. Can you give me some advice on how to reach out for mental health support, how to find a psychologist? That's really special, because it means someone feels comfortable to start seeking support for themselves, and they feel comfortable to actually ask for support from, usually it's people I'm not even particularly close with. It's a acquaintance or a friend of a friend of a friend. And that's really special for me. On a larger scale, something that was really special for me was I got to, and it's a big, long, fancy government name, the Queensland Parliamentary Mental Health Select Committee. But they were investigating the state of mental health in Queensland and what needed to be done, what needed to be improved. And so I got the chance to speak to the committee, and they were all, MPs. And I walked into the room going, oh my God, are they actually going to listen to me? There are some politicians who are really down to earth and others who you don't really know their life experience. You don't know if they're actually going to relate to you. I did a, talk in front of them saying, here is my lived experience. Here are my concerns about mental health in Queensland and the mental health system in Queensland. And here's what I believe can be done to address those things. And after I finished speaking and, off the record, I had a couple of MPs come say to me, I want to let you know I had a very similar lived experience to you. I want to know that you're not alone, that I've gone through the same thing. And to hear an MP say that, particularly because I was talking about my experience with being a suicidal child, that was really eye-opening for me to go, oh, it's not just me. There's people from all walks of life who experience these things. It was quite special. And then I think about 9 months later, the report got released, and all the recommendations that I'd made were part of the report. And I'm sure I wasn't the only person who made those recommendations, so I'm not going to take credit for it. But that was great for me to be able to say the things that I believe in have been put in this report, and now the government can be held accountable for it.
Sometimes being in that position of being able to tell your story, just the impact that can have on people is just simply amazing. And Grace, advocacy requires diverse strategies. What specific approaches or methods have you found most effective in creating awareness and promoting mental health support within communities?
Yeah, you've got to meet people where they're at. Every community is different. Stigma is different in every community. We can't just, have the same set of policy or the same set of, education tools and apply that to every community. We need to look at what is unique about each community and develop, unique strategies for them. So in the area that I live, it's a lower income area with, higher rates of mental health difficulties and particularly for young people. So it's okay. We're working with young people. What are the concerns of young people in the area? The concerns of young people are housing difficulties and inequality and trouble with staying in school. We need to meet them where they're at. And I've shared different parts of my story depending on the circumstance. So in some circumstances, when I'm going out to speak to teenagers in a high school setting, I talk about my difficulties in high school. In other settings, I talk about my experiences as a queer woman. In other settings, I talk about my experience with chronic illness and how that's impacted me. It's looking at the demographic and going, what is going to most resonate with people? What are they going to identify with and understand? And what is the unique stigma that they might be facing? Is it that there's a lack of services? Is it that there's been things in the media that have been unhelpful? Is it a lack of education? Because it's a area where there's a lack of it, people don't tend to achieve a higher education. I try to do research on what it is I'm doing and how I can best meet people where they're at. Particularly sometimes when I'm working in policy and clinical governance, I try to let the psychologists and doctors who I'm working with know I'm not blaming you. I'm not having a go at you or questioning how you do things, but I'm giving you my perspective and I want you to consider, how can we change what we're doing right now? It's okay for change to happen. Sometimes, people who I'm working with can feel attacked when I say I've had a poor experience with the healthcare system. I've had poor experience with, a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Is letting them know I'm not blaming everyone. It's okay. But the healthcare system is kind of built on inequality, and let's reconsider what we're doing and how we can change it to benefit you and me, to make your job easier and my life easier.
No, thank you for that, Grace. How do you strike a balance between self-care and advocacy to ensure your own well-being whilst supporting others?
Easier said than done. It can be really hard at times. There's a part of me that feels selfish when I look after myself because, no, your job is to look after other people. You have a bigger purpose than yourself. Your job is to advocate for the community. And a number of years ago, I was talking to my dad and he said, Grace, you can't look after other people if you're not looking after yourself. And that sounds really simple, but it struck me in the right way because I feel this incredible amount of guilt. I feel selfish when I look after myself. But I went, no, I'm not just looking after myself. I'm looking after other people by looking after myself. So I try to not overbook myself with work, and I love working. I'm a workaholic. I try to look at my schedule and go, okay, I've got this project coming up. I feel good about it, but realistically, I'm going to probably feel a bit emotionally exhausted after it. Let's try to book in a catch up with a friend and not book in anything else that might be emotionally draining. I try to be more in touch with my feelings, which is easier said than done. I don't always identify what I'm feeling until I'm really in the dumps. So I try to be realistic. Like I said, go, well, this is going to be a really big project. I might feel good now and I might feel good the week after I do it, but it's realistically going to take a toll. So let's book some me time. Let's try and look after ourselves. It's doing, like I said, the hard things, going to the gym, pushing myself out there when I might not necessarily feel like it. And I'm really lucky to have a really great support network. I catch up with my friends and family regularly. I tell them what I'm doing. I ask for their advice. They let me have a cheeky vent every now and then. Yeah, it's doing those little things in the long term that, allows me to support other people.
Grace, looking ahead, what specific challenges or improvements do you hope to see in the landscape of mental health support, and how do you believe your advocacy will contribute to these changes?
We've had a lot of royal commissions in the past few years looking into, people with disabilities, veteran suicides, and I think we are going to see a really interesting change in the landscape over the next couple of years. A lot of challenges to the way we've traditionally done healthcare, we've traditionally looked after people. I think one of the big things is the paternalization of governments and NGOs believing that we know what's best for you and we're going to tell you what's best for you. We're starting to see more organizations have people with lived experience on their boards, not just, a lived experience advisory group that ticks the box, but a lived experience advisory group that truly has power within an organization, that truly challenges the status quo. For me, coming from studying psychology into specializing in suicide prevention. Psychology, like a lot of medicine, is based on a lot of hierarchies that the doctor knows best. And we're starting to see that challenge of let people with lived experience have a say in their care, listen to them, educate them on their options and allow them to choose. I think it's going to be a really interesting challenge for, mental health industry as a whole, as well as, the broader health industry. As, consumers, we are seeing consumers, advise on more projects, have a greater say on what's happening in the healthcare landscape. My advocacy at the moment, I just helped develop a new course where I got to advise on a psychology course on how they talk about suicide, on how they include lived experience. I got to record some videos for the course. So rather than just a psychologist saying, this is what suicide looks like, we now have a person of lived experience saying, this is what my suicide looked like, but it looks different for everyone. And that's really special to me. So I think it's going to be challenging and confronting for a lot of people that we're starting to challenge that status quo of power hierarchies. But I think as we do that, we'll see greater improvements to mental health care. I really hope we'll start having meaningful conversation about mental health. I feel like the past 5 to 10 years has been a focus on letting people know that mental health exists and that it's okay to talk about, and that's really important. But I feel like we need to take the next step and say, here's how you have a conversation. Here's how, not necessarily how you identify it, but here are some things to look out for that a mate might be having a rough time, that it's okay to talk about it. If they don't want to talk about it, let them know that you're a shoulder that's there in the long term. People have a really, I think, antiquated view of stigma. It's when someone says something nasty, they say a slur, they say something cruel. But stigma can be little things, like I said, being told we don't want to promote you, we don't want to put you in a leadership position, because even though we know you can technically do it, we're worried about your well-being. It's those little things that can be stigma. And I think that's something we really need to start talking about parentification and infantizing people who experience mental ill health. How do we make people feel safe in the workplace to disclose without worrying about their job security? One of my big hopes as well, as someone who wanted for a long time to be a psychologist, is changing stigma within the health industry. I've had the privilege to work with so many people who have a lived experience, but are scared to disclose it because they're scared of losing their license or being fired or having their expertise questioned. And so for me, if we're going to create a society where people feel open to talk about their well-being, we need to create a health industry where practitioners feel safe to talk about their well-being. Because for me, as someone who has worked on hiring panels for psychs, I'm more likely to trust a psych who is in touch with their feelings and has acknowledged their own challenges and is able to put their hand up and say, I think I need to step back for a bit, I'm having some challenges of my own, than someone who doesn't do that.
What message of hope or encouragement would you share with individuals facing some of their darkest days?
It can be hard sometimes to believe in encouragement when you're feeling that way, but you are worth it. You are worthy and deserving of support. No matter what you feel, no matter what you've been through, you deserve love and support. There are people out there who genuinely care about you and want to listen. I think in those dark days, I used to remind myself things can only get better. In those lowest moments, things can only get better from here. It can be hard sometimes to find the right person to talk to find the right doctor, the right psychologist, but it's always worth it. You're always capable of more than you realize.
Thank you so much, Grace, for sharing your story and being part of the Holding On to Hope podcast. I really appreciate it and look forward to seeing what's in store for you next.
Wow.
Thanks for listening to Holding On to Hope, the podcast. Lifeline is grateful to all Holding On to Hope participants for choosing to share their personal lived experiences openly and courageously in order to offer hope and inspiration to others. Your act of kindness makes for a better world. And remember, you don't have to struggle alone. Visit toolkit.lifeline.org.au today.